There are warplanes that inspire fear, some that inspire respect, and a few that inspire legends. But the Junkers Jub 87 Stuka created something else entirely: terror. Its sirens screamed as it dived, its wings cut the air like a knife, and its bombs dropped with mechanical precision in the early years of World War II. To terrified civilians and retreating soldiers, it seemed unstoppable, almost supernatural, like a hawk striking helpless prey. Yet the Luftwaffe made one of the dumbest strategic mistakes in aviation history. They believed the Stuka could dominate the entire war. They believed slow, awkward, fragile aircraft could keep ruling the skies even as Britain and later the Allies grew stronger. This script is the story of how Germany placed its faith in the wrong machine, how the Stuka became obsolete almost overnight, and how the Luftwaffe ignored every warning until it was too late. Because sometimes the biggest mistake in war is not the weapon you build, but the moment when you refuse to admit it's already dead. The birth of a weapon of fear. In the 1930s, Germany was rearming in secret. The Luftwaffe needed a specialized dive bomber that could deliver pinpoint strikes against enemy defenses and armor. Bombers of the era were notoriously inaccurate. Simply dropping explosives from altitude meant half of them missed by hundreds of meters. The Stuka was designed to fix that. Engineers built a strong, almost brutal-looking airframe, inverted gull wings, spatted landing gear, and a massive pair of dive brakes that allowed it to point straight toward the Earth at terrifying angles. Pilots were trained to dive vertically at over 300 miles per hour, release their bombs with perfect timing, and pull out at the last possible moment using automatic recovery systems. Germany equipped the Stuka with a psychological weapon as well, the Jericho trumpet. A wind-driven siren mounted on the undercarriage emitted a screaming howl during the dive. The sound became iconic and horrifying, a sonic signature that announced your death before you saw the aircraft itself. It was not just a bomb, it was a message. The Stuka dominates Europe. When World War E began in 1939, the Stuka was exactly what Germany needed. The Polish campaign showed the world how devastating coordinated air and ground assault could be. Columns of armor advanced while the Stuka destroyed fortifications, bridges, trains, and communication centers ahead of them. French and Belgian troops experienced the same brutal efficiency. The Stuka didn't have to be fast or agile. It only needed to attack targets already overwhelmed by German tactics. Tanks, bunkers, artillery placements all fell to its precision strikes. And the Stuka became a symbol of blitzkrieg, of unstoppable conquest. It seemed perfect, but all of this success hid a fatal flaw, a flaw the Luftwaffe ignored. The Stuka could only operate in skies where the Luftwaffe already had total control. It was extremely slow, barely reaching 255 miles per hour. It was almost defenseless against modern fighters. Its turning radius was huge, its armor thin, and its gunners exposed. One Spitfire could take down an entire formation. Germany knew this, but arrogance blinded them. Instead of replacing the aircraft or improving it drastically, they doubled down. And that was the dumbest decision they could have made. The mission it should never have been sent to. In the summer of 1940, Germany launched the Battle of Britain. It was the first time the Stuka would face a determined, well-prepared air force on equal terms, and it was a disaster waiting to happen. The Stuka was perfect against armies, trenches, bridges, and retreating convoys, but it was a sitting duck for modern fighters. The British radar network detected incoming raids before they reached the coast. Spitfires and Hurricanes scrambled quickly and climbed into interception positions with ease. As the Stukas crossed the channel at slow speeds and rigid formations, RAF pilots could hardly believe their luck. Pilots described the aircraft as flying targets. Some said shooting them down felt almost unfair. The Luftwaffe leadership refused to listen. They sent wave after wave of Stukas against British airfields and radar stations. The result? Catastrophic losses. On a single day, August the 18th, 1940, known as the hardest day, the Stuka squadron suffered such heavy casualties that they were effectively withdrawn from the battle. Germany had learned the truth the hard way. The Stuka wasn't a universal weapon at all. It was a tool designed for a specific job, and they had used it completely wrong. The day the Stuka died, the Battle of Britain proved something Germany refused to accept. The Stuka's era was over. It could no longer operate in skies with enemy fighters. Its performance was embarrassingly outdated. It was slow, lacked maneuverability, and carried only 2 small machine guns for forward defense. The RAF ripped through them with ease. Pilots died in horrifying numbers. Crews started to lose confidence in the aircraft that had once made them heroes. The Luftwaffe briefly tried to modify the Stuka, adding armor and more weapons, but every attempt made the aircraft even slower. Even Roland Freisler, one of the aircraft's biggest advocates, admitted privately that the aircraft had no future in contested airspace. But Germany had invested heavily in the Stuka. It was tied to propaganda, tied to early victories, tied to the myth of German invincibility. Bureaucrats and generals refused to give it up. So instead of retiring it, they forced it into secondary roles. And yet the aircraft kept being sent into situations where it had no chance of survival. The Stuka's second life in the East. When Germany invaded the Soviet Union in 1941, the Luftwaffe regained temporary control of the skies. This gave the Stuka a second life. Soviet forces were scattered, poorly equipped, and overwhelmed. Stukas once again became flying artillery, blasting armored columns, destroying supply lines, and supporting infantry advances. Pilots like Hans Ulrich Rudel became legends. Rudel, flying the Stuka, destroyed hundreds of vehicles, dozens of tanks, and even a battleship. But the warning signs returned. Soviet aircraft rapidly improved. The Yak-1 MiG-3 and later the La-5 outmatched the Stuka completely. Soviet anti-aircraft fire grew heavier every month. The Luftwaffe slowly began losing air superiority. Every time Germany lost fighter cover, the Stuka squadrons paid the price. By 1943, the Eastern Front skies were filled with Soviet fighters that shredded Stuka formations before they could dive. The aircraft that had once been a symbol of German strength became a symbol of German stubbornness. The Luftwaffe kept using it because they had no replacement, not because it still worked. The dumbest move, refusing to evolve. While Britain, America, and the Soviet Union rapidly improved their aircraft, Germany fell behind. The Luftwaffe became obsessed with building heavy bombers, then obsessed with jets, then obsessed with miracle weapons. But that left their frontline aviation. The aircraft actually needed day, outdated and vulnerable. The Stuka was the clearest example. Instead of replacing it with faster and more flexible aircraft earlier in the war, Germany kept it in production. They built nearly 6,000 Stukas even after the design was clearly obsolete. Technology wasn't the issue, Germany had the engineering capability to replace it. Doctrine was, the Luftwaffe believed too strongly in a rigid, old-fashioned vision of air warfare. They had built the Stuka to support the army, and they kept forcing it into frontline combat long after the skies had changed. Meanwhile, Allied aircraft evolved at a stunning pace. American P-47 Thunderbolts, British Typhoons, Soviet Yak-9s, all were fast, powerful, and deadly. The Stuka was none of these things, and the Luftwaffe refused to admit it. The final years, a flying relic. By 1944, the Stuka was practically extinct on the Western Front. The skies over France, Italy, and Germany belonged entirely to the Allies. Fast, heavily armed fighters patrolled constantly. Any Stuka attempting to attack Allied armor or positions was instantly intercepted and destroyed. Most surviving Stuka units were converted into night harassment squadrons, a humiliating role for an aircraft once feared across Europe. Pilots removed the Jericho sirens, not for stealth, but because the extra drag made them even slower. Ground crews patched bullet holes daily, engines strained to produce enough power to climb. No amount of bravery could compensate for an airframe designed for a different war. The Stuka became a ghost, outdated yet forced to fly, each mission a gamble with death. Even its top ace, Hans Ulrich Rudel, survived only because Soviet pilots were ordered to kill him on sight and dedicated entire units to hunting him down. The Stuka was no longer a weapon, it was a dying symbol kept alive by desperation. The dumbest move, explained. Believing your own propaganda. Why was the Stuka kept flying long after it should have been retired? The answer is simple: pride. Hitler believed early victories proved German superiority. The Luftwaffe believed blitzkrieg tactics would work forever. Stuka pilots believed their aircraft was unbeatable because it had never been challenged properly in the early years. Propaganda portrayed the Stuka as a symbol of invincible air power, and when reality changed, no one wanted to admit that the symbol was a lie. The dumbest move was not building the Stuka. It was refusing to replace it when the world changed. Germany locked itself into a weapon that had a very short window of usefulness. Once that window closed, the Luftwaffe was left with a liability, one that cost thousands of lives and contributed to Germany's collapse in the air war, the legacy of the falling hawk. Today, the Stuka is remembered for its terrifying sound, its brutal efficiency in the early years, and its infamous dive bombing accuracy. But its real legacy is a warning. The Stuka teaches us that a weapon is only as good as the conditions it is used in. It teaches us that battlefield success can create dangerous illusions. It teaches us that a military that refuses to adapt is doomed. When the Stuka was protected by German fighters and used in blitzkrieg tactics, it was deadly. When it faced true resistance, it collapsed. And when the Luftwaffe failed to evolve, it paid the price. Conclusion: the real cost of arrogance. The Junkers Stuka began the war as a predator and ended it as prey. It terrified millions, but its downfall proved a harsher truth. No weapon stays invincible. Germany's real mistake was clinging to a relic while the world evolved. Invar, refusing to adapt is the fastest path to destruction, a lesson the Stuka paid for in flames and twisted metal.